Okay, yeah. Today we're just going to discuss a model that I built a few years ago about organizational diversity, uh, and I have an opportunity to potentially apply this model to the recruiting and retention of Aboriginal people in a large infrastructure company in Canada. And we're reviewing the model that I built a few years ago to see how this might be adapted to the current situation in this infrastructure company and with Aboriginal people in Canada. Anyways, I made a video of the describing the model along with a demonstration of the user interface that we built for the model. And I can put the link to the video in the comments for this YouTube video, and you can look at that video. But we're just going to talk about the video today and the implications of this diversity model and the organizational diversity model, and uh, I think that I think we'll have a very good discussion. So Eric Roseman has just recently watched the video. Martha Toy has not watched the video, so Eric's going to give us his impressions of what he saw in the video and how what may be missing, and what we might want to add to the model, as well as maybe how we can apply the model as it is. So, Eric, I understand you took a lot of notes, so you can just start the discussion.
Yeah, and I'll start by being clear that I did just watch it, and my notes aren't comprehensive. So this is just a kind of a brief explanation or observation of what I saw and the potential of the model. I think the model itself is great. It shows the power of interfacing and feedback loops in system dynamics and how those things can be applied to understanding and improving problems. In this particular model, it talks about biases in organization, potential biases in organization, and also the people, and also people within. Sorry, we're talking about hiring minorities within an organization, and the potential biases within an organization, or the potential biases within minorities that could influence the levels of minorities within an organization. So in this particular case, a organization wants to increase the amount of minority workers. So we're taking a look here at what could be causing this difference, right? The differential of how many more minority workers are actually working there. Is it bias within the organization itself that's preventing these minorities from coming in, or is it bias within the minority that doesn't want them to join this organization? So the model does a very good job of explaining the balancing and reinforcing loops that could potentially be a problem here. But I see some unintended consequences, and this is why I say I think the model does a really good job of explaining a teaser. It's a teaser into the introducing system dynamics and how powerful it can really be, because it really shows you how simple and also complex systems can become really fast.
Yeah, just as a point there, I think that you really hit the nail on the head, that models are simplifications of reality. And this model is a highly stylized model of an organization with just two types of employees, minorities and majorities, and two types of positions, workers and managers, and I guess two types of bias, which is systemic bias and inherent bias. So it's a very stylized model. It's simple, but I think it does have some value in trying to understand the problem. But yeah, I think you're right that that there's much more to this work that needs to be done.
Eric, question,
Go ahead.
Eric. So when you said the word difference, the difference between what, like a target, like a target distribution of employees and
Yeah,
or like,
the difference that is looked at in the model is that the 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 population of the organization is not representative of the community around it. So
okay,
the idea is that you want the populate you want the organizational employees population to have the same distribution of minority and majority people as the community it's in. So it
uh,
has to be representative. And so we talk in there about representativeness. How representative is this organization of the community that it's
got it.
working in?
Thank you, thank you. Perfect.
See, so if the goal here is to increase representation, the first step we're trying to determine the model is why is there a gap in the first place, right? Like that's kind of that's kind of an important part. Like why does this gap exist in the first place, and what can we do to address that? Because that's critical here. So the assumption here is that there could be some potential bias here. So what I'm suggesting here is this model is a great introduction to potential, how to potentially solve the problem of bias, but it could also cause other problems if not taken seriously or taken in consideration and being careful with the modeling. That's why I suggest this as a teaser model, why you'd want to work with a system dynamics modeler to add onto this model. Because this model suggests bias. So what if there isn't bias? Like I want to bring up the idea that suppose you're the policymaker and, you're working with a modeler and you do determine that there could be some implicit bias in the hiring practices. So we determined that we need to change some of our hiring practices to increase the amount of minorities working in our organization. Well, what if there wasn't implicit bias in the hiring processes? What if the hiring managers had a different purpose or different goal for hiring who they hired? Maybe it's an experience thing. Maybe it's a skill gap. Maybe it could be potentially a ton of different things. But so to assume it's bias and then
Yeah.
to attack the problem as bias, you could be setting yourself up for causing new problems by actually creating bias, because now you could create resentment in hiring managers or any
Yeah.
other department that you're trying to fix, because they know they weren't being biased, but if they're being told they were being biased, that could cause some serious resentment and it could pop up new problems in other areas, and you could actually be creating the problem that you're trying to prevent in the first place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an interesting idea, but that wasn't my intention with the model to suggest that people were biased. My intention with the model was to show that if the situation is unbiased, things will get better over time naturally. And what would stop it from getting better could be bias. But basically, if you watch the video, you'll see that I have this idea of a unbiased hiring and promoting process as the default value. And then when I run the default value, you see that the organizational gradually becomes more and more representative of the community when there is no bias in the hiring process. And bias in the hiring process could stop it or slow it down from becoming representative.
True,
But
but
basically, what I'm saying is that yeah, if we can just maybe you're right, but maybe I'm also trying to say that if we have a situation where there is no bias, things are going to get better slowly. Then the question is, can you wait? Is the improvement fast enough? And I think that's a problem that's happening around the world, maybe mostly in America, somewhat in Canada, is that the progress is not going fast enough for the people who are experiencing this problem of lack of representativeness. And so they want to speed up the process. And
Yeah.
then the idea is that then there's a backlash of people who don't want to speed up the process, want to take it slower. So we have this problem of different different time goals or time ideas about how quickly or slowly they want this thing to change. Because change is difficult, and some people want change right now, and other people want to take it slowly and do it gradually. And that's a big problem right now. I think is the perception of how long it's going to take to get to equality. I think Martha,
Yeah.
you had something to say.
Yeah. Is there a place in this framework of problem solving or discussion? What is the place for in our mental model here for articulating as clearly and as specifically as possible what are the goals of the organization to begin with? If it's being stated that one of the goals, and any organization has multiple goals, what's the priority with multiple goals? What is the priority as within the set of goals of equal representation along whatever marginalized group criteria you wish to include? Where is that priority relative to, say, quality of product or service that the company
Yeah.
is moving towards?
Yeah, that I think
goals
I think that's
be included.
important, but I think that's really not considered in this model, which definitely it's an issue that I think is raised when you bring up the subject of hiring, is that
Yeah,
that what the company should be focused on is is profit or product quality
exactly.
or customer service, and
Right.
but this model doesn't really get into that in any way. It's only focused on the populations of the community and the populations of the of the organization. And it does make a very huge assumption, which I think Eric is getting at as well, is this whole idea of the pipeline. It assumes that that there's a pipeline of people from the minority group that are moving in, that could be moving into the organization. And basically, what I assume in the model is that if a person has the qualifications for an entry level job, they should be considered equally to anyone else who has qualifications. That I
Yeah.
don't have this idea in the model of people who are better than other people. All I have is this idea of qualifications. And if you have the minimum qualifications, or if you have the qualifications, you should be considered the same as anyone else with the qualifications.
Yeah.
So there's always a question in hiring. You want to say you hire the best person for the job. Well, that's not in the model. The only thing that's in the model is qualifications, and there's a certain amount of qualifications you obtain, and then you're considered qualified, and then you're considered equally with everyone else who's qualified.
To add to that, sorry, Ruther, just real quick, I just want to add to
Okay.
that. There is also there's qualified, and then there's presentation, right? Like, for example, I could be qualified just as somebody else, but if I send in my application and all the words are spelled wrong, or there's bad punctuation, or I didn't care, or it looks terrible, versus somebody who's got the same entry level qualifications, but they took time and they carefully put their resume together, and they put a nice picture in there, and it looks like they're actually trying to get the job. I'm going to pick the person who looks like they cared more, right? Like, what if the person shows up and makes a phone call after they and said, "Hey, thanks for the interview. I really hope I get this job." That person to me shows more ambition. So here we're not talking about just qualifications and entry level skill. There's many more other elements that contribute to influencing somebody to hire somebody else.
Yeah, I think those maybe come into the idea of recommendations for change, or for policies. Maybe we have a program that can train people to do well in interviews, or to do well in resume writing, or basically, if we see that the quality of the applicants is in the application form, or the application process is lower than it should be, maybe we develop a policy to assist these people in making a better presentation. That could be a policy, right?
Absolutely.
As an invitation to keep the model in a perspective of what's the boundary and what's the boundary of the model and what's in the environment, what constitutes the environment that this model is in. And I hope this is in the spirit of making the model more relevant and potentially impacting to the viewers of the model, is to say, and perhaps have in the assumptions of the model, outside the model itself, but in the assumptions of the modeling work, that you are assuming whatever we talked about the goals, you are assuming, like, we
Yeah,
think
yeah,
we need to get it into, we need to get that information into somehow into the global environment, and to show people that we are aware of this bigger picture, and that the model accounts for it outside the stocks and flows. But yes, that's where I think we're really missing out on plumbing the full value of what is the purpose of of assumptions that a
yeah.
model within.
Yeah, I think definitely this model and the interface that we've developed could benefit from a page. Like basically the interface has a number of pages where you get text and examples that you can work with of how to understand the parameters, how to run the model, and
Good.
how to interpret the results. Now, it could really benefit, as you say, from a page, at least one page, maybe more pages of assumptions.
Yeah,
What are the assumptions that went into the model? And I think those assumptions are what I'm talking about here.
I do.
Like, for example, the qualifications, like, for example, the idea of representativeness. And the goal, like I said, being representative is an assumption, so
Yeah,
I think that
that is,
really it would benefit the model interface and all model interfaces, I think, would benefit from a discussion of the assumptions that went into building the model. And a
absolutely.
lot of those assumptions, like you've already said, is the boundary. What's the boundary of the model? What's
Yeah,
the system boundary you're talking about? And what are you including and what are you not including in the model?
exactly. In other words, where is this system living?
Yeah.
Where is it existing?
Yeah, it's a stylized organization in a stylized community, but you can say, we these are assumptions we've made, and if you don't agree with them, then maybe we need to change the model. But let's look at it for what it is right now today.
Precisely.
Okay,
Yeah,
Precisely.
move on, Eric. You
if
have
you
some
don't mind,
more?
I kind of do want to come back to what I was originally talking about with unintended consequences and unintended consequences of this particular model. You did mention there is right. You can look at this model as neutral, no bias, but that's not what the model is built on, right? This model is built for bias. It's not. This model is not about the journey of increasing minority workers. It's about potential bias as a bottleneck to the journey of increasing minority workers. So if I'm a decision maker and I'm using this model, I already have the idea implanted in my head. What if there is bias, which there could be? I'm not suggesting there isn't, but I think that let's assume the decision maker decides, yeah, I think there is implicit bias here within our organization. And with that assumption, without doing the right investigations, right? That's where I say, like, there's potential here. I'm not saying the model is wrong. What I'm suggesting here is we could add components of this model to make it more robust. Because now what we could do is we could set up a new model on the potential investigation of removing bias, and then we could show what if you're wrong, like what the unintended consequences of if you're wrong, if there's no bias. If there's no bias and you think there is bias and you try to address a problem that's not really there, you could actually create the problem that you're trying to avoid. So I think that's where I'm trying to show the power of system dynamics modeling is, yet we just showed a teaser model, but I think it would be really important to show the potential unintended consequences of taking this model out of context and what could happen if you just use this model without adding on to it and looking at further boundaries and expanding your boundaries to make it more robust and fit within your actual goals, which is increasing minority worker, right? That's ultimately the goal, is increasing more minorities in your organization.
Well, and I think another goal of this whole project is to increase the relevancy and the ability to be understood by the model viewer. Everything needs to be in a context, a larger context. I mean, that's how our minds work.
Yeah, I think you're right, Martha, that and I think Eric's right that, using this model as a teaser can also provide a person who sees this model as opening a door to something very big.
Yeah.
And that door could be, like you say, Martha, a system dynamics in general, at using system dynamics in general to solve the very complex problems of organizational dynamics, right? Or organizational, very complex models, in a realistic way. So
Yeah, yeah. And when you say like solve and in a realistic way, I just think when we use the word solve, it implies that, oh, we don't have that problem anymore. It's gone. It's a problem. It's not a predicament. Predicaments, which stay. But I encourage us to to consider using the word manage problems, because they are always going to be present. These challenges moving forward are always going to be present. So I think you could what are your thoughts on thinking about our terminology here and
yeah,
to
that's another
manage?
good point that I think Eric and I have brought up in a number of other areas, is vigilance. Basically,
Yeah,
you need vigilance. You can't, we had a model of organizational culture. And the idea of organizational culture was that, the organization was suffering from maybe a poor culture, and they wanted to improve the culture of the organization. And that's could be done. But then, once you've improved the culture of the organization to some extent, you have to be vigilant that you don't go back to your old culture, or you don't, you keep focused on maintaining that high quality, inclusive culture. So that's
And
something I think.
what you talk about here too, Ivan, is root causes, right? We're talking
Yeah,
about solving root problems and not the problem itself. That's the problem. If you solve the problem itself, well, the problem could just come back. But if you solve the root problem, in this particular case of culture, maybe it's having standards and holding standards, right? If that's the problem that we address in the future, then every time we fix a problem, if we've solved the standard problem, well, then we could probably keep that problem away if we hold standards in place rather than letting them drop like drifting goals.
yeah, that's drifting goals, when you don't have vigilance, and you end up with, cutting corners and getting maybe back to an old days that is not really where you want to be,
The power of
today and the
architects.
future.
yeah. I would like to add in, Jay Forrester always place great emphasis on the modelers being aware of what is the purpose or purposes. I would say purposes these days. What are the purposes of even doing this model, of even creating this model, let alone the purpose of the company, the goals of the company or organization that's being studied. But he was very adamant that the purpose, that the model has to be so as explicit and comprehensive as possible, I think, in sharing what the purpose of what the many purposes of the model are. And I would submit that I think one part or one component of the purpose of this model is not just to solve or manage a problem and to have maintenance, or sorry, have vigilance around it with respect to its chronicity, but to raise shared awareness about the problem, and to really define the problem, to start to help what to define, well, what is this problem
Yeah,
to begin
Yeah.
with, and to
Yeah.
make and to in your what do you call it, your user interface, to state that's
Yeah.
just so important. You are here raising a shared and trying to create a shared understanding, a shared definition
Yeah,
of
I think
problem.
Eric was getting at that, getting at that quite well in in the idea that, you know, what created this problem? You know, why are we in this problem? Why are we in this
Yeah,
dilemma to begin with?
yeah. What are you making
And
models?
so, you know, I think that's important to recognize that, yes, you know, we are in a position where we don't want to be. How did we get there? And how, and hopefully, if, like Eric says, if we can get to the root cause, we can see, yes, you know, this is how we got to where we are. And by solving the root cause of the problem, we can get to someplace that we want to be, rather than where we are today, or where we are headed in the future. So
And are
carry on, Eric.
and are able to talk about it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
are able or are able to give and receive feedback. Every single person is able to give feedback and receive feedback
Yeah.
from others in this conversation. It's to teach that skill
Yeah.
of giving and receiving feedback,
Yeah.
authentic feedback.
Okay, Eric, can you continue on?
Sure. I would just add to that along with purpose and the goal of the model, it's what pain point does this model solve, and how useful is it? Right? You could have the most complex model on earth that solves any problem, but if that model is not useful, nobody's going to use it. Right? This is why Apple's so powerful. Is the major pain point, in my opinion, that they solve is complexity of technology. We talked about this. Ivan and I talked about this, that I think I liked the way you describe it. Ancient people can open up an iPad and use it and figure it out immediately. That's a complexity of technology is a huge problem, and many companies have been trying to solve that for a very long time. And then
Yeah,
one comes along and actually solves it. So to me,
yeah,
it's how useful the model is in application to what you want.
yeah,
And what everybody wants is to solve pain points. Right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, all companies do that in one way or another. And if you're not very good at that, that's the power of modeling. Is to me, part of the power of system dynamics in particular stock and flow modeling, this is why I call it journey modeling, is because stock and flow does a very good job at identifying pain points and touch points. It identifies every touch point in a system, and that's where the pain points exist. It's the interaction between the system and the user. That's the thing that either attracts people to it or pushes people away. And then system dynamics cleanly defines those touch points. And then once we've defined those touch points, then we can dig deeper and figure out what exactly it is about that touch point that's either pushing people away or bringing people in. And if you can solve that, you have a competitive edge.
I love your use of the word clean, actually, because I think the stock and flow, like a conceptual language that such as stock and flow and closed loop diagrams, those symbols, they're so it's such clean vocabulary,
Yeah, I
like
agree.
culturally neutral.
Also, too, I think Eric has hit the nail on the head that that we're all on a journey, you know. And I think that, you know, system dynamics modeling talks about behavior over time, which is a journey. And it's, you know, so yeah, go on about your idea about a journey, Eric.
Oh, okay, yeah. So this is why I like to call system dynamics models journey models, because a stock and a flow, like you said, it's a pipe and a storage container, right? The storage container fills up and releases, and then there's stuff that's moving through the pipe in every scenario. So it's a journey of anything, and that's why journeys are powerful, because journey isn't just a person moving through things. A journey could be anything. It could be a process moving through things. It could be raw materials moving through a manufacturing process. Everything goes from one place to another. Maybe it sits for a while and continues. But yeah, when looking at things as a journey, that's how you uncover bottlenecks. That's right. That's where you find the kinks in the hose, and that's ultimately what everybody's trying to do, is be the best at finding that bottleneck and solving it. And that's where I think the true power of system dynamics comes in, and it's what we can do a really good job of. And this is where I completely agree with you, Martha, with when you talk about language. it's very important for us to use language that everybody can understand. If we say stock and flows, people are going to be that causes friction, right? If I don't know what a stock and flow is, I immediately have to think, what are they talking about here? And then it's something I have to figure out. There's tons, right? There's a bottleneck there. Where if I say journey, it's an inherent thing everybody understands. There's no friction in that. I could say journey and everybody understands that it's behavior over time in one way or another. So therefore, there's no friction in the word journey. Therefore, I can move on to the next thing that you're saying and try to continue, try to keep understanding what is the thing that you're saying, right?
Yeah, I think that also there's a couple of things that we Eric and I talk about a lot, and that is the endogenous nature of system dynamics, and how it's not the external world that's causing your problems, it's the system itself or the people in the system who are causing their own problems. And did you want to speak to that, Eric?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm going to pull something up here. So if you want to continue with that thought, and
Okay, yeah. So, anyways,
I'll add on.
that's a challenge. It's a real serious challenge for system dynamics to communicate to people without necessarily blaming people for causing the problems that have been created. So, so you don't want to you don't want to turn people off who might benefit from system dynamics by starting to point fingers and blame them for causing the problem. So so maybe that's where Eric was getting on about this whole idea of bias, and that the idea that that by suggesting that there's bias in the system, we're pointing a finger at someone in the organization and saying they're the problem, they're the thing that's causing this problem. And I think you have to be very careful when you do that, when anytime you get into that kind of dynamic, that you don't turn people off and then threaten people and lose your audience because you're just unpleasant to be around.
I agree, and that's so key. But I would also I would build on that hugely, and perhaps in the spirit of using things that we understand, that apperception phenomenon is to bring up the idea of the dream team approach, as opposed to over and beyond the single player approach. If you're going to blame another person for your miseries in life, that's missing, I think, missing a crucial and fundamental, essential system dynamics principle, in that when you start to look at teams of people, it's not the people themselves, where you're trying to work at, the level that you're trying to work at in this dream team is what is the problem, where is the problem with the relationship between and amongst all these people. So, for example, with the Globetrotters, they're individually and within themselves, and each of them within themselves, they're each like fantastic, like their skills as their dribbling, their shooting, all these individual skills are fantastic. But guess what? This other skill that they have is the skill of knowing their relationship with every other player on the court, and simultaneously having this game, making it operational. What makes that system operationally optimal and wins games is that they understand how it moves through time as a series of relationships amongst individual people. It's not the people themselves, it's the relationships and the multiple relationships and how those relationships impact on each other through and back and forth through time.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I think that there's a certain amount of pushback from a certain group of people. I would say probably there's there has been talk about agency in many organizations. So, for example, some people will say that an organization is really that nothing gets done in an organization without people. So,
Right.
people do the things that an organization does, so that there's a lot of agency of the employees to either um, mm, get achieve the goals of the organization, or possibly maybe uh, uh, sabotage the goals of the organization for whatever reason. So, for example, there's there used to be, I think, an implicit trust between management and workers, that if the workers were working hard, and believed in the goals of the company, and tried to achieve the goals of the company, that they would be rewarded with a secure job. And I think that that has gone by the wayside, and that now we're talking about a situation where job security is not guaranteed anywhere, and that
Yeah.
people will be laid off and fired routinely, without any maybe cause, without any maybe serious cause for that. They're just downsized to increase profits, or to meet the bottom line goals of earnings values and profit. Anyways,
Well,
yes,
I really need to finish this, because this is important. Is the idea of the duality, or the idea that there are two things going on here. You're back to the dream team idea. One, these players have they have an idea. I need to be the best that I can be. And it's not, or the team can be the best that it could be. It's this question of duality. It's both. It's both. It's both. I
yeah,
need to develop my skills, and I need to develop my relationship with the other people on the team, because that's going to come back, in fact, when I think of it, to me. And I'm going to reach my potential. I'm going to reach my potential by this route and by this route, because it's
yeah.
going to, the team feeds
Well,
back and helps me reach my potential.
yeah.
Both.
Well,
And,
going
and
back to my point, is that this whole profit motive, and shareholder value idea has sabotaged that. So, for example, I've heard about ranking employees and firing the bottom 30%, 10% of employees, and every year, ranking them and firing the bottom 10%. And that leads to, I think, a negative consequence, definitely, of people not willing to help each other. Because if you help someone else, that hurts you. So you're not going to cooperate with other people in the organization if there's a potential that will make you drop to the bottom 10%, and you will be fired.
uh,
If I could just add to that, like
that's unfortunate.
I think what we're talking to about here is just basic systems thinking 101, right? Whereas a system isn't about taking an element of it in isolation. It's about the interaction between elements, right? So, and I think also what we're talking about here is a line descent, or oh my God, why am I not thinking about we just talked about this, Ivan, aligning incentives,
Yeah, that's
right?
yeah.
That's ultimately what we do. So if you're an organization and you rank order fire and that works, that works, right? That keeps you competitive. As long as you're staying competitive, you're working in a market until somebody else comes along and turns that upside down and figures out a problem. It figures out a different solution, which is improve the bottom 30%. Right. And if that can become more efficient than fire the bottom 30%, then they will take market share. So it ultimately, it's a game of competition. Again, this is a game of edge. And this is why I think that System Dynamics has an edge in consulting with these companies, because we can help them understand certain touch points and certain interactions between system elements in ways that in ways that they can't without using it.
Yeah, I think also Eric and I, Martha, have been discussing the problem, like I said, of questioning assumptions of businessmen or organizations, and the value and the problems with that in terms of, like I said, threatening people. When you say someone is making an assumption and it's wrong, that can be taken as a insult or some kind of confrontational idea. However, Eric and I, we agree that businessmen, they really their focus is on survival of their business, and if they're making the wrong assumptions, they want to know about it. They're not necessarily going to feel threatened, maybe if their survival is at stake, and they will actually respond to our kind of messages, because they can see that what we're saying will increase the survivability of their organization. Did you want to talk about that, Eric?
Yeah, because if you don't do that, then you're increasing the risk that you fall behind, right? Because eventually an organization will come across and challenge those assumptions and maybe find a solution that you didn't see. And then you're going to point your finger and say, well, the market beat me, right? Where incompetence isn't an excuse in nature, right? Nature does not care if you knew or didn't know something. It's going to do its thing. So you have to be assuming or questioning everything. So if you're not questioning everything, we could look at that as a problem. Why aren't you questioning everything, right? Like that could be a root cause. That could be a root problem within the organization. Because if you refuse to question things, well, what other things are you refusing to do that could be causing bottlenecks? So your lack of assumption could be causing problems, and we can figure that out.
Yeah. I want to wrap up here a little bit. Can we, did you have more you wanted to say about this bias model, Eric, that you can sort of say as wrapping up?
As wrapping up, no. I mean, we could have another conversation about how we could use this model as a teaser, and then what things we could tease around it. Like that could be like our next conversation if you want to do something like that. Because I have lots of ideas of, if this model looks good to somebody, well, this is why hiring us would be beneficial to you, because we're going to take this model and these are the things that we're going to add to it to make it really comprehensive and robust given your situation, so that you're actually making the best possible decisions by showing you the unintended consequences of using us or not using us.
Yeah, I think, that's the message at the end of the video is, this is a generic model, and if you want to apply it to your organization specifically, you should contact us and we can help you adapt the model to your organization.
Let's show them specific things we can add that could really
Yeah,
excite them, right? Because
yeah.
there are some really specific things that we could add that they go, oh my, I want that.
Martha, do you have anything to say in closing?
Yeah, I really like the idea of presenting a generic model and showing how robust you can make a final model that is adaptable through options to sort of boutique the model to a particular organization's situation. I think that exemplifies yet another power of using the system dynamics modeling approach, is that it's as flexible as we want our imaginations to be. It's not rigid. It's very living and dynamic. The models themselves are living representations of our reality.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my bottom line and my final note is that I hope people are interested in looking at this model and seeing what we've been talking about, and I'll put a link to the YouTube video of the description of the model in the comments for this YouTube video that we did today. And if, like I said, if you have any questions, you can get in touch with any of us, Martha, Eric, or myself, and we can discuss how system dynamics can be applied in your situation. And we'll be continuing these kind of discussions. I think, as Eric said, we've only touched the surface of the potential of this model and of course other models that that System Dynamics and in particular models that we've been developing ourselves. So, okay. Well, thanks very much, guys. And like I say, I hope people will find this video interesting and be like Eric says, teased into watching the original video that we were talking about in this presentation today. And like I said, and hopefully, you know, you'll encourage us to have more discussions like this. So we'll see everybody in the next video.
Thank you.
See you
Thank
later.
you, Eric. Thank you, Ivan.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Great to be with you.